Oh, I'm glad you're up and around and do better. Tell you, it's a long road, isn't it?
Oh, not me down to that. At least 10 good days.
Yeah. You know, been working in, yeah, been in the hospital for like 25 days. Yeah, he came home. He was on hospital last night at the party. Young man. And his twin got it, and he's fine. Got the same gene. Twins.
Guess what?
That doesn't make sense. But she, oh, shoot. Not fun. Hey, there he is.
How are you doing? I like it.
I back to coffee.
You're not the only one you're in.
No, that's the only time I ever.
Pretty much. Yeah. Lord, I can see that.
You can see tomorrow.
Yeah, I can see
Tomorrow,
right.
you need a passport. Did you get?
I did. So. All those horses came, put away for the night.
They're spoiled rotten.
I know, I seen that in the reflection.
Yeah. Well, my horses are still on the mountain with no blanket on.
Oh, really?
Regular horse, but my daughter's horses.
I know you guys are paying your bill, but
They about throw
I keep mine
them
set
away.
at 6 p.m. So you guys are trying to put your money on live. Maybe the stage light.
So we have,
There you go. Now you're open for business.
So we have that. And then we'll be down about, well, we just went down by now, but.
Can I ask a question? Which, where are you looking on the?
My nephew, I'm here with Chase. I don't know.
So 5 years.
They live up here. They move like that. They walk through that church. They just don't throw them up without saying every day. But they still live there. They aren't.
Did they change the rule on that? Because I thought you could only do one term now.
Steve has the big garage door section.
Just Taylor's not.
I can't listen to this.
No, I told him I knew it was work.
Oh, I hope you don't have to.
Where did
Yeah.
I sent him.
Townhouses all.
How are you?
He liked it first. I wanted to talk to him.
By a thread?
Bringing down.
We have a house on the Washington side. that first thing.
Stay hydrated.
We've always looked at trash. Oh, it is. That's what starts our hands with them. Yeah. We still go down.
This is about the city code, this is about the city code. Got paid to do it. Well, because they filed an application and they wanted to have it. So there you go. Well, some of it's against our suggestion. I know, I saw it. I did quote, I don't know what they do. It's there. See, I always get it. Right?
Sure. Get my email. Yes, I did.
Yeah, second set. Bullet number 2. Right. Oh, isn't that across here? Okay.
Do it in Boston Breezes. Yeah.
I need a new laptop though. It doesn't hold a charge at all, so I think you can, but I'm ready to show you that.
By the way, this was a
Huh?
huge packet.
125.
I might have to borrow them.
You're good. I got my own today. You're good.
Not by myself.
Oh, I did?
So I'll read it to you, and I forgot myself.
You cannot.
They're as low as you can go, basically.
Need a little,
You and me both.
that's it.
All right, 6 o'clock.
Michelle, don't laugh at that.
I have to say.
I know.
Okay, Michelle, you ready?
Ready.
You got the hammer.
All right, well, good evening. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting for South Weaver City. It is Thursday, December 9th, 2021. All the commissioners are present except for Commissioner Walton. He asked to be excused. So we will begin by having the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll lead that, so if you'd please stand.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll now begin with our public comment period. If you have a comment related to the public hearing later on, we'd ask that you keep your comments to that. But if you have something else you'd like to discuss or bring up, now is the time. Please note that you may speak for 3 minutes or less. Please state your name and address and direct your comments to the entire commission. And please note that we will not respond during the comment period. Paul?
Yes. I have an issue with one of your statements just now. Is that my public comments will include both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Paul Sturm, 2527 Deer Run Drive. My public comments are with regard to agenda item number 2, discussions on the South Weaver Gateway development, public hearing and action on preliminary plat, improvement plans for entire development. Packet page 15 of 299, subdivision dashboard, planning commission. Please note that under quick stats, this preliminary plan does not meet city code. This is particularly surprising since the gateway concept has been under development for over a year. Also, this plan will also require yet another rezone. It appears that the developer is just throwing his plans against the wall to see what sticks. Another concern is the developer requesting a waiver from city code for the fencing requirement between R7 and lower density zones. The presentation appears to address only the 2 zones within their development, but not the zones on the development boundaries, such as the charter school and others. It should also be noted that Mark, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Fernelius, a property abuts the gateway property, and it should be fenced if Mark Fernelius so desires. Other owners bordering the gateway development should also be consulted. Packet page 16 of 299, preliminary application project information. The owner is shown as Jane M. Paul, trustee, whereas on packet page 23 of 299, the property owner is shown to be Farrell Paul. Which is it? Staff summary review, bullet 1, clearly states that the private right-of-way proposed does not meet city code, that they chose to proceed anyway. Do they want? Should say, what do they want? Most homeowners on the south side of the gateway development have fencing. What about the rest? Suggested the developer, if the resident wants a fence, should install one. Also see packet pages 18 and 19 of 299 regarding landscaping. Packet page 18 and 19 of 299, PL8 landscaping R7 complete with conditions bullet. Bullet 2 requires a 6-foot solid screening fence between R7 and lower density zones. What about the charter school, property owners, and the storage units? Packet page 19 of 299, PL-10, outdoor storage space, R7 complete. Once again, the developer is requesting a waiver to sidestep existing city code. Inside storage is not outdoor storage. I also have 2 major concerns with approving this waiver. Moving the storage inside will reduce the size of the garage area. And more importantly, there is a safety factor to be considered with having inside storage. Where will a resident store any flammable material that they may have, such as camping fuel and supplies? This is a safety issue, not only for a single resident, but for all attached townhomes. Packet page 20 of 299, staff assessment bullet 2, city code and public works standards. This addresses the fact that, as mentioned before, no private streets are currently permitted in the R7 zone. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Is there anyone else who has any comments they'd like to share? Okay, seeing none, we will move to item number 3, approval of the consent agenda, the minutes from last month's meeting. Any discussion on those, or? Okay, if not, I'll look for a motion to approve the consent
I'll make a
agenda.
motion to approve the consent agenda and the minutes from the November 10th meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, moving on to item number 4. Public hearing and action on preliminary plat improvement plans for entire development and conditional use for siege zone over 1 acre for South Weaver Gateway Project. 62 lot R-7 residential and 18,000 commercial located at 2350 East South Weaver Drive by applicant Brad Brown for Colliers International. Trevor, you want to give us an introduction on this, and then we'll.
How do you share, present it? Bottom corner is the, right by the, nope, over by the Zoom, negative Zoom. There's it. Okay, and you go ahead and advance it. Whoa. Should I send you the right one? Why is it already on the screen? Resend it, I guess. I thought I sent you the right one. All right, let me forward it. That was just fine. I don't know what.
We can do a quick one. This better be a really good PowerPoint.
But it should be a good informative PowerPoint, yeah. That is not it.
Are we baking cookies?
Okay, I'll just save it again. I've refreshed it. Yeah, try opening it one more time. There we go. Okay. All right, then slide 4. No, down at the bottom right corner, it's still the same symbol, right, with the 84%. Yeah. Okay. So south of the gateway, the packet was very long. So thank you for everybody that took time to review that. I know that it can be a slog to read all of it. So thank you. This project for approximately 2300 East South River Drive. Applicant Brad Brown. The owner is stated on the county's website is Stephen Paul, trustee. What they're seeking is a preliminary approval of their subdivision. This is an administrative action to consider the approval. It will not go to the city council, which is an action that is done by the planning commission. Okay. So here's a quick fact. On the property, there's 2 zones, an R7 zone and a CH zone. That zoning is taking place back in July of 2021. There are 6.58 units per acre. The total acreage for the site is 11.64 between the commercial and the residential properties. On the quick view, the dashboard, we did mark that it does not currently meet city code because of the private right-of-ways that are proposed within the residential portion of them. That item, the private right-of-ways, are currently still with the city council. They continue the item to the January city council meeting for. I hope you could heard some of that. I apologize. I should look at the light. Some other notable comments. The traffic impact study was completed on October 23rd of November and subsequently updated on the 1st of December to meet submission comments from the city engineer. And that the information that was submitted was found satisfactory for that project. Another consideration from the time of the packet was the buffer yard. The developer has asked some variances for the some waivers for the buffer yard requirements. That's the word I'm looking for. As stated in code, they wish to put a 3-foot berm with a 3-foot vinyl fence to be installed on top with vegetation, and have a shorter buffer yard. This is within the purview of the city council to waive those requirements in the landscape ordinance upon favorable recommendation from the planning commission. So that's just something to consider when looking through that, whether or not that meets the desired need for the buffer yard to limit noise and light pollution entering into the residential properties. The fence between R7 and lower density requirement. Right now, there is some fencing that is placed on the homes that are above that property and to the side. The developer has notated on their plan submission that they would install a fence on the properties that do not have a fence placed in there to comply with the code. So we just would, it's the consideration that fits the requirement rather than requiring them to fence the entire perimeter where there's already fencing that is complete. That's something that we have done on other residential projects. If there's already a fence, then we won't require them to install 2 fences back to back. Does that make sense? One other comment that was notated a little bit later that I sent an email out to the planning commission was that there is a portion of the property, if you want to advance, Kim, I think it's the next slide. Yep. There's a portion of the property in the CH zone that was overlooked in the setback requirements. The setback requirements from a residential zone in the CH needs to be 20 feet from the rear and 10 feet from the side of that commercial area. And so the building that's in phase 3 would need to have that consideration be met, or a different configuration of buildings to meet the setback requirement. This is something that can be put as a conditional item on an approval, but it is an item to consider in making sure that the setbacks are there. Go ahead and advance one more. There was concern brought up on other setbacks throughout the entire project in the R7 zone. As we looked over code and reviewed the definitions of lot frontage, and setback, and then the requirements of the R7 zone with legal staff and the city engineer and myself, we did come to the determination that due to this being a multi dwelling property on the same lot, then the orientation of the setbacks is based on the frontage road. And so that's how the setbacks were calculated. The front being the front of South Weaver Drive, the rear being the opposite edge of that, and then the 2 sides of the side setback. There are codes out there that talk about front yard, backyard, side yard setbacks, and our code just delineates front, rear, and side as relates to a lot. And so that was a consideration there for us to discuss on that. So I just wanted you to be aware of that that finding, because we had a comment and concern about that, and I wanted to let you know that was where the interpretation of staff for the setbacks were on that. You can advance the slide. And then we've talked about this, but the private right-of-way ordinance was continued by the city council. So this project, as it was submitted, is dependent on the private access road to the buildings, and so it doesn't currently meet code for the project. So I've put in front of you, and this is an example of some different motion options that are available for this project should you move forward with it, for an approval, denial, or continuance of the project. At this point, the developers requested some time. If you would like to ask me questions prior to the developer or have the developer speak, that's up to the commission.
Oh, hold on. so if you're done, let's move to the public hearing part. And that way, if the developer wants to address any questions that came up during the public hearing, we'll do that. So do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing action on preliminary plat improvement plans for entire development and conditional use for the CH zone over 1 acre for South Weaver Gateway Project, 62 lot R7 residential and 18,824 square foot commercial highway. Located at approximately 2350 East South Weaver Drive by applicant Brad Brown from Colliers International.
Okay,
That's a long one.
do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is now open. So if you have a comment, feel free to step up to the podium. Please state your name and address.
Elizabeth Rice, 7875 South, 2310 East. So the hard part with having a public hearing before we talk with you is that it's not really a conversation. So we don't really know what you're going to say. So we don't really know what we should say. And that to me makes it difficult to have it be a conversation. But just to build background knowledge a little bit, we started this process before the general plan was considered. We started this process when it was still commercial highway. We've had a family council for the past 5 years to try and decide the best way to present this with the city. And I feel like this is our best plan. I really feel like it's a win-win. And I'm hoping that the city and the citizens feel like it's a win-win too, because it gives us the commercial piece that we need. And it also gives us some homes. When you look at the state has 50% of our citizens cannot afford a home. And I think that's very common for South Weaver, must be that way, that there's that many citizens that can't afford a home. And so they can start with a townhome and be able to build some equity and then build up and live in our city. I watched the process of the density over Zoom. And I have to tell you, that was the most frustrating night of my life, because I watched two different opinions go back and forth of a higher density and a lower density. And to me, 7 was not a compromise. It went very much low density, and we're meeting that requirement. So I don't really know how our family can do more to come up with a good plan for our city. And we live here and we love it. My dad's been gone 30 years and we've kept that country feeling, but right now I think we're a little bit country. The rest of the end of East End all developed, and we couldn't even get water to our South Weaver ditch because the rest, Bambro ditch, excuse me, because the rest of the Bambro ditch was able to put it in the canal, but we couldn't because we had all those homes between the canal and our farm. So I hope you'll remember that we've done our best. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Paul Sturm, 2527 Deer Run Drive. Public hearing, agenda item number 4. The title has already been read. In packet page 20 and 21 of 299, staff assessment, bullet number 1, traffic impact study. Can this TIS dictate that UDOT restripe State Road 60 South Weaver Drive to have an eastbound right turn lane into the development? Also, what impact will this have on South Weaver Drive parking adjacent to the charter school? Number 2, Packet page 20 and 21 again of 299, staff assessment, bullet number 5, phasing. I believe the phasing aspect of this development needs to be carefully addressed, assessed, and strictly defined so that it can be enforced. How will the phasing agreement be enforced and development not run amok with regard to project phasing? As was discussed during the Planning Commission meetings, there is a CH element to this development that is of great importance to South Weaver City and was one of the determining factors when the property rezone was approved. Packet page 21 of 299, staff assessment, bullet 6, buffer yard. Once again, the developer is requesting another waiver. I have lost count on how many waivers have been requested so far. To me, this appears to be another loft type development where there are so many requested changes and challenges. Packet page 2324 of 299, land use application and conditional use application. Another concern I have regarding phasing enforcement is that as currently presented in the conditional use application document, it indicates that Farrell Paul, current, or whoever is really the owner, is anticipating selling the Gateway development property to Colliers International, proposed. My concern is that since Colliers International is a, quote, Canada-based diversified professional service and investment management company with annualized revenues of $3.6 billion, $4 billion including affiliates. Note, this discretion was extracted directly from their website. It would be an extremely large company with which South Weaver City would be doing business when trying to enforce the Gateway phasing or any other agreement. I do not know if it is possible, if a possible surety bond should be levied on this project to reduce the risk to South Weaver City. The information in the conditional use application is not complete. It does not identify all the bordering zones and surrounding land uses present for the property. Thus, it is incomplete. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Please.
Earl Paul, 2316 East, 7800 South. I guess I can't stand to sit there and listen to some of this stuff without making a comment. First of all, I agree with my sister. I'm hoping that the new mayor can maybe make a change with this, but back in the old days when I was on Planning Commission and City Council, we didn't let you make your comments before things were discussed because it's either a meeting late or you're projecting things that haven't happened yet. It just makes no sense to me. Seems like the public hearing ought to be after a presentation and there's been some discussion. Second of all, it wears me out to come to these and see people who have so much time on their hands that they spend all their time looking at all the I's that aren't dotted and T's that are crossed and try to make a critical argument over a project or something that's trying to take place. It wears me out. Third, it's not their money. It's easy to sit there and take all this time to require this and that and the other when they're not spending any money on it. It's not their investment. It's not their property. It's not anything to do with them. They think they speak on behalf of the community at large, but they don't. They speak for a minority. And it gets really tiresome. It's really, really tiresome. Like my sister said, we've tried 100 different ways to make this work for the city. The city has a division of what they want. If you turn it over to the citizens, some want it all commercial, some wanted it no commercial, some wanted ponies out there forever that they don't have to worry about owning and feeding and watering. It's just so frustrating. I didn't come plan to talk, but Colliers International is not buying our property. We have some realtors that are selling our property. So to act like colors come in here and spend billions and millions of dollars to make this happen so that every T is crossed and every I is dotted to the satisfaction of every single person over and over and over again is really, really frustrating. It's very frustrating. I wish we could have some of this taken a look at the 60,000 foot level instead of microscopic things. I've sat in other council meetings and I've seen our council people just berate businesses that are trying to do something good here, and they just fight over the nitpicky things. Well, this shows you should have 3 shrubs and you only have 2. Well, this shows that this fence is white and you have it beige. I mean, it's ridiculous. I know you have to do certain things, but we just get caught up in so much of the minutia that we don't move things along. This city has a reputation of being very, very difficult to work with. And some citizens like that. They will throw up every single obstacle they can because they don't want to see progress. They wanted it the way they had it when they came here, and now close the door, nothing else should happen because I want to see that pony out in that field. Sorry, it doesn't have a lot to do with things, but I'm just frustrated, and I wish that we could get past the important things that we got to be done. I agree, but let's not nitpick things for eternity and wait for all the stars in the universe to line up just exactly before we make decisions and move forward for something that's going to benefit the city and the community and residents in a common way. No one's ever going to be totally satisfied with what happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Charlie Paul. I guess I live on the farm. At least I did last year. I'd like to talk about the Highmark School. If there's parking on South Weber Drive, it's the Highmark School problem. It's not my problem. They built the school. If they need more parking, they need to make more parking. That's a terrible argument. I've heard it over and over in city council and other places. Please think about it. That's crazy. If they need more parking, they need more parking. Make them do more parking. We talked about having higher density and that people would get to the freeway in 1 minute and they'd be out of South Weber. Nobody cared to think about that. You've done what you want with density, but whatever traffic is there, very little is going to go down South Weber Drive. What we're hoping, what South Weber's hoping, is people will come to that little center, that little mercantile center, and spend some money and then leave again. So when you're thinking about that, please put it in mind. And I'll tell you, if this was horse trading, we'd just walk away. We'd say, trade horses somewhere else because you guys keep changing your mind and making different offers. So please think about those things.
Thank you.
Michael Grant, 2622 Deer Run Drive. I had also not planned on talking, but I couldn't let the comments go past me. Here in this office in 2017, this thing has happened in the past. We talked about lofts. Lady was sitting here, Lori Gale. She said she wanted to have a small a daycare center for 6 children. And Rob Osborne said that hopefully it's not a backdoor entry to a much bigger construction. And sure enough, they asked for 74 units within a year. The lot was only 200,000 in the beginning. Once that got the zoning change, it became 650,000. And then the price went up to 2.2 million once the 64 units were approved. And now it's up for sale through Berkshire Hathaway. So we have seen this happen in the city, and a couple of you guys were already on the panel back then. So, and number 2, Paul here does research. He discusses with at least 5 of us. He may not be the majority for the city, but most of the people are sleeping in this town. And since we were sleeping, including me, we got lofts. We don't want the same thing to happen again. We want people to have their property rights, build whatever the code allows. Yes, the stars do need to line up according to the code, according to all the rules, but yeah, it's your property. You should be allowed to build whatever is legally allowed. Thank you.
I'll allow it.
Just it'll take 30 seconds.
1 minute though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is the city needs to keep in mind when it comes to traffic studies and things like that, the city has a big piece of property that they have interest in, that they own. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If people start saying, well, there's too much traffic and all this, realize the city's gonna have your own issues to face with your own property, whether you're gonna sell it to a developer or whatever, but I thought I'd just maybe mention that, keep that in mind.
Okay. Anyone else? Not, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Is it Mr. Brown? Would you like to say anything?
Thank you for your time. I think, we all can see there's a lot of passion that goes along with this, and people feel strongly. And I think that's a sign of a good community. People care about where they live, so we appreciate that, and that's why, we like South Weaver. Paul mentioned for the past year, I wish it had only been a year since we've been working on this, or a version of this plan, but it's been quite a bit longer than that. But we are here just seeking a site plan approval for something that's pretty much within the zone. We recognize the setback issue that Trevor mentioned, and like you said, we can have that conditional. And then the right of way, we were hoping that it got approved on Tuesday, and we plan to comply with the statute however it lands. So obviously we would like an approval, a conditional approval, but barring that, a continuance to after the right of way is finalized. And I did want to address a few of the things like the fence, the berm. The code says a 6 foot tall, opaque, solid fence. The intent and the discussion with staff was more of an open feel. And so, we thought a berm with a small vinyl fence on top would, be more conducive to the feeling that we've been told that the city wants. Completely up to city council, but, we're more than willing to go back to the other way, but yeah, we're hoping we're at the tail end of a long process. We feel like we've been good partners with the city, trying to get what you wanted. You guys are aware this has come before planning commission, at least most of you guys, at least a couple times, and and we've been told that we've been good partners, and we hope to continue that. And are there any questions we can address?
Well, let's open it up to the commission.
I said, you have one more question. I do, so I'll go first. The biggest question I had was in the I can't remember what you guys called it, and I forgot to take notes on it, but it was the distance between the residential and commercial. It was 10 foot instead of 20 foot, but you said there was a road right there. Can I get some clarity on, does that, are we basically just deciding if that road compensates for the distance? Is that basically what we're saying?
Yeah, so the buffer yard requires a 20-foot buffer yard with a fence at the property line. In this instance, there's not a 20 feet of yard, but in that same section of code, it does say that the city council can waive any provision of that section of the code. And so we felt that because there was the separation with the access road and the yard with the berm and the fence, we felt that complied with the overall intent of a buffer yard to allow for some space between.
Is that space still 20 feet with the road?
Yes,
Oh,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That was the one thing that I wasn't 100% clear on is
Mhm.
I know that they're looking for can't remember, terms are lost on me, but I know they're trying to get a waiver or an
Exception.
exception there. So I just wanted to know if the distance is still the same, even though it's not all grass or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, the distance is the same. For the majority of the CH zone, except for that one parcel, that proper or building that I pointed out, all of that fits that setback of 20 feet for the buffer yard. Yeah, we probably want the full.
And we have a version now revised with that 20-foot setback. You know, Trevor called me a day or two ago that, you know, and we talked through that. So, you know, we fully intend to comply with what the code says and what the city wants.
And if I'm looking at it correctly, we're just looking at that bigger commercial building with the 2 townhouses, right? Is that that's
Correct.
what we're talking about?
Yeah, the one that the rear is to the open space behind it. That sits right on that edge. So it's not a property line, but it is the zoning line for the commercial highway rezone.
Yeah. Okay. That was the only thing that I needed clarity on. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Losey?
Do you really want to go to me?
It's either you or,
We're going to start
Well-
the discussion. All right. Well, and I guess kind of tapping into, we're obviously talking about phase 3 and the setbacks. One of the first things I had was between our commercial and residential setbacks, it is a 6 to 8 foot masonry fence, not a vinyl fence, and 20-foot trees. And the purpose of that is that creates kind of obviously that buffer between the 2 zones, you know, a noise, a light, you know, issue that it's supposed to help protect, you know, for the citizens that will be living there. My question is that 20-foot setback between a commercial and a residential zone, how does that apply to the eastern border? If you want to kind of zoom in on that section, those townhomes, that whole eastern property line with the residential building, yep. What's currently on the plan, the setback there? Because it looks like 5 feet.
It's 11 and some change.
Okay, so half of what code specifies, correct?
So when you're looking at when you're creating separate lots for each unit on the property,
Mhm.
then you base it on the lot that fronts the street.
Yep.
Each of these buildings aren't on a separate lot; they're all in the same lot.
Will they be having
with
separate
actual
parcel
roads.
numbers?
So that's when we read through R7, it allows for multifamily, and then a for sale product that we can see that it allows is like a condoed product. A townhome plat wouldn't be allowed because a 0 lot line isn't allowed in the R7 zone.
Mhm.
Currently. That I don't know when we did the rezones because I wasn't here if that was the intent, but that's how we read the code, that there is no 0 lot lines available, so they wouldn't be able to do a townhome for that project. But they would be able to condo it. The condo would house inside one building. Our code allows for multiple buildings to be on one lot.
Mhm.
And so as we orient the lot based on our code, because it talks front, back, side,
Mhm.
based off the lot, we calculated the side setbacks for that at 10 feet.
Okay, because I guess where I have an issue with that is that state code Title 50 actually defines what a plat is, and it is an instrument of subdividing a property into lots as depicted on a map or other graphical representation of lands that a licensed professional land surveyor makes and prepares in accordance with section 10-9A-603 or 57-8-13, And a subdivision means any land that is divided, re-subdivided, or proposed to be divided into 2 or more lots or other division of land for the purposes, whether immediate or future, for offer, sale, lease, or development, either on the installment plan or upon any and all other plans, terms, and conditions. And that's state code.
Mhm.
So how do we trump that in saying, well, no, we're just defining the entire division? And I guess this is a subdivision, correct? It's not a PUD? Okay,
No, we're
I'm
not
asking.
subdividing. I mean, this is all still the same parcel.
so is it a subdivision?
No,
The residential component is a subdivision of individual homes?
no,
No.
Okay,
no, it's not.
so it's gonna have a single address then, if it's all just one lot, one parcel, correct? So every home is gonna be, let's just say South Weaver Drive, address 1.
Well, yeah, they'll each have their number, but yeah, I guess,
They'll be
and I don't know how that
units.
works exactly, Trevor, I defer to you.
Yeah, they would be units. So on a condo plat, it would be a unit. So unit 1, unit 2, or unit 101.
Is that how
unit
it's been
102.
done with previous townhome developments? Like
No,
Sandalwood Cove,
no,
Freedom Landing? So
no.
explain to me the benefit of doing it this way.
So
To
a
the city,
condoed
to the
unit,
citizens, to the people that will be living
Right.
here.
a condoed unit is you own the area within the walls
Yep,
of the building. You don't own you don't own the outside of the building. The building is owned, it's a commonly owned building for the area. So an HOA would own the land, the road, and the buildings, or like group would own all of that. And the individual would purchase the interior unit of that building. So even though they are in the style of a townhome,
mm-hmm.
it would be a condoed townhome and not a townhome lot. Brandon, do you?
I was just gonna add that in some of the previous ones, like Freedom Landing, it was also a PUD, which
Mhm.
allows for a 0 lot line. So therefore, you can have each individual unit owns the ground underneath where the unit is.
So these ones will not own the ground underneath the structure.
Not unless it was a PUD. So like Trevor was explaining, a condo, you own the airspace. A traditional townhome, you would actually own the ground underneath each of the units. The difference between these two is that this is, so far, it's only been proposed as R7 only with no PUD. They'd have to, in order to allow for it to be like Freedom Landing, unless, Trevor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it would have to be a PUD to allow it to be like that.
Okay.
But the R7 does allow for it to be a condo.
Mhm.
Because that's what I'm trying to understand,
Yeah.
is it a subdivision? Is it a PUD? If it's a PUD, is there an HOA? How is it going to be managed, maintained, sold?
So to have a PUD and to have an HOA is two separate ideas. They're not always
Mhm.
interconnected.
Mhm.
So an HOA is a homeowners association. PUD is just a planned unit development.
Yep.
Planned unit development can be all single family homes. It's just a different configuration. And there's some provisions in our code that allow for some of that configuration. With this being one lot with multiple dwelling units placed upon it, then we calculate the setbacks based off the buildable area of that lot. And so the buildable area of that lot is 30 feet from South Weaver Drive, 30 feet from the back of the lot, and 10 feet from either side of the lot. Our code doesn't factor in orientation of building into the setback requirements. It's
Okay.
only required off of the lot size. If that's something that we want to change and update to add more clarification in the code, that's something we could do at a future meeting. But as our code reads now, and this was confirmed by our attorney, we sat down. I spent all Tuesday with our attorney trying to look at that. So we look at the total building area. So if you look at a lot, basically our zoning creates a box you can build in. You can only go so high, you can only go so far out. And you can have a massive buildings. In our definition for lot, it allows for multiple dwelling units on the same lot.
Okay.
And so that's this product it's multiple buildings. And when they go to sell the product, they're selling just the condo inside. So they can choose to condo and sell the condos, or they can choose to just have a rental unit, but they wouldn't be able to do it as a townhome because the R7 doesn't allow for 0 lot lines, meaning it's a lot that butts up right up against another one and there's no setbacks.
Owning the ground underneath.
Owning the ground underneath, right? So that's how we had to take the buildable area in our calculation and not the orientation of the buildings, even though there is a private access street through it, that they're not subdividing in individual lots for each building. Each building is all part of one overarching lot that is oriented to South Weaver Drive.
Gotcha. And that helps with the explanation. Part of that then goes into the buffering yard landscaping. And this is specifically related to the fact that it's on sensitive land. The entire community is located in what's been designated on our sensitive lands map. And so when you start looking at that and the requirements within our sensitive lands code, the buffer yard becomes kind of very specific in terms of what is required. And it's the mature trees, I believe. Exact reference. 10-15-7 buffer yard landscaping. Wouldn't those setbacks along that east boundary need to be applied?
Are you talking about the sensitive land section of the code?
It's actually the buffer yard between the
That's-
commercial, the
that's the land-
residential,
Landscaping.
or
What-
buffer yard landscaping, but then you go into the buffer yard, sorry, where it shows the masonry wall will be at or near the property line. It has the trees and the spacing of it. And then as far as you going into like the landscaping and everything, because it looks like you've got a grouping of trees that's just right there, but isn't it supposed to be along the entire length? Not just a grouping of trees?
Yes. if
Per our
they're-
code. Again, it's
per
per our code.
Yes, right. And I think what they're requesting is what they have on their landscape plan and the berm and the fence on top of that. If that is a more aesthetically pleasing thing than the masonry wall, like is being proposed, or like is in the code for your consideration. If
Because I know,
you-
because
if you
along
think
that boundary, could you do the berm? Does that still, because I know it's between the
Are you
commercial
talking
and the
about-
residential.
Are you talking about between their project and the detention basin?
Yes. What's the fencing along that edge?
So the commercial zone would have to supply.
The
that
masonry
buffer
wall
yard.
and the buffer, what is required on that eastern, where it's between the retention pond, which basically is the playground for Highmark Charter School. Because I can't tell by looking at the landscape plans or any of the plans
So this,
what it is.
the developer wouldn't be required to create the buffer yard because that's not the commercial use. That property that's the detention basin is our use. And so we would then be required to do a buffer yard if we were to develop that detention basin.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I'm not sure how that would happen.
We wouldn't develop it, but that's because they're putting it next to us, it doesn't make them do it. It would, if we were to change it, we would have to fit the code at that point.
Okay. Because that's a concern. And again, it's the safety for obviously right now, what that use is. And I guess to get into it with the commercial aspect where you've got the straight drive approach heading towards what is a detention pond with heights, variances, and what that fencing is going to be. Somebody accidentally hits the gas instead of the brake in terms of trying to turn into that driveway. What happens if they go through a vinyl fence? And where do they land? Because it's a safety concern that I have. And if there's not that buffer yard, spacing or trees or a solid masonry fence to help prevent that, what could be done? Because it sounds like there's nothing from the development standpoint you're saying can be done. Because again, it's the protection element.
What drive, well, my question is what driveway would be fronting that would be the concern?
No, it's the commercial space in the approach. And I wish I could show you, like, they're coming in, they want to go to the drive-through, the coffee shop or the ice cream shop, whatever that's going to be in that northeast section. Their approach is, once they turn into the development, they make a left-hand turn, that straight approach. It straight on goes to where the retention is. And the fencing there, if we don't have sufficient fencing that's going to stop a car going through there, because that's right along that edge of the retention pond with, what's the height of the retention pond there? 12 feet?
How deep
10
is it?
Mhm.
I don't know. Yeah, 8, 10, something
Okay.
like that.
Because again, that's a playground. That's part of the school. It's an actively used space,
But it has a fence
a chain link.
currently, yes. There's really, I don't know, as far as that, what you're talking about, there's nothing in the code that would require that.
Brent, if I can interject here, we can play what ifs all night, but our goal or our responsibility is to look at how this applies with the current zone. And I understand your concern, but what if a plane falls out of the sky? I mean, we could sit here all night doing this. So if we could keep our comments to the project, to the code, and what we've been asked to review, I think everybody would appreciate that, so.
And we've done our best to, create a project that fits within, the code and, a lot of review with the city and we've taken as much feedback as, as the city staff can give us. But, so this project fits within the code to the best of our knowledge and ability. And just like with the thing earlier this week, if there's something we missed that we can fix, we're good partners, so.
Well, and know where I'm coming from. Like, this is all code. Like, this is administrative. This is all, does it fit within our code? Is it allowed? Is it disallowed?
Well,
That's what I'm trying to determine.
Your concern with that driveway approach, it is a commercial highway abutting a commercial highway zone. And so there's no provision to require a buffer yard between those two.
Is that what the
Yes.
school is designated under? Is
Yes.
a commercial
Yes.
highway?
Yeah, it's all zoned, the detention basin and the school is all zoned CH.
So because they're same uses, we wouldn't require a buffer zone in that place. If it was a residential zone, then yes, we would require a buffer zone at that point.
So maybe just to restate, R7 doesn't require a buffer yard. The CH does. And so the buffer yard would be along
The commercial
the boundaries between those two zones.
and the residential.
And what they're proposing doesn't match exactly what's in the required in the code. And so they're asking, if we propose this, is that better? That may be a little more aesthetically pleasing. I think there was some talk at some point, and I don't know if this was just with the staff, but that between these two, since they're both new, you may want to soften that a little bit. But if you don't, you could certainly just require the 6-foot masonry fence and I mean, I think they would obviously do it.
With the trees and the spacing and all of that.
Right.
Correct.
And just to restate also that the 20-foot trees means 20-foot at maturity.
I thought it was 20 feet to be placed, because at that point, if you're putting in little saplings,
You need to put in trees that will be 20 feet at maturity.
okay? Good to know.
And, going back to the history of this a little bit, I mean, this was originally, the city told us they wanted a mixed-use project. And, so in keeping with that, in our last discussion with the staff, everyone agreed that a masonry wall between, was not conducive to a good, feel, a good, what the city would want. And so we discussed it, and that's what we proposed, knowing full well that city council, is the final word on that, but,
I'll just say, I've seen the berms with the smaller fences. I think they look great. I think they're much better than just a brick wall,
right.
personally. Now, you could argue, well, that makes it really easy for people to
Hop over.
go over or whatever, but I mean, if someone wants to go over a fence, they're gonna go over it regardless.
And the discussion has been, we want, a community feel. We want residents to come into the commercial. We've got, trail going up. We want people to be able to walk through and, so the berm, 3 feet up, that's enough to stop a car, stop headlights. You got your fence there. But, we're open to discussion. We just thought that felt like a nice feel,
I know you have more.
I have more, I do. And this is a question, just a question. The maximum height of the building, both the residential and the commercial, I couldn't tell where it was denoted. And is the commercial height not really being set yet because we don't have an understanding of the use?
It's 35.
35 feet is the
35 feet
maximum
max.
height.
And
in
that's
all
what
our
it's
zones.
not, hey, this building will be, I don't know, like the residential buildings are all going to be 35 feet? Or are they going to be lower?
They can be
Well, they-
at most 35
At
feet.
most
Yeah, they
The
can be
developer
lower.
can choose
yeah.
underneath that.
Yeah, they're within the code.
Okay. So I'll just keep going. Landscaping plan. Is it complete? Yes or no? Because it looked like the plans for that southern hillside, which is basically behind all of the townhomes that are located to the south side. It looks like the homes are actually going into the hillside, which that was a question I had. And then what, in terms of the maintaining of that hillside has been taken into consideration. And when I mean maintenance, like with the landscaping, like, will it be native grasses? Is it going to be just what's there? Will there be any planting or actual landscaping done on it? Because this ties into, and I wish Chief Tolman was here, just because I was curious in terms of if there was to be a fire. I know one of the big things on, and let me find it because I actually researched this, is the, I've got to find it. The wildfire map on the U.S. Forest Service's website. It actually goes right along that hillside. And so what kind of fire mitigation and access for fire personnel is being considered and planned for?
We've had all this reviewed by the fire chief.
Okay, so
And-
he's given his stamp of approval on
Yes,
it?
that's part of this process, so.
Okay,
Yeah, the landscape plan has, a seed mix, non-irrigated grass hydro seed that will be placed on the hillside is what.
so what's there right now will be removed and then redone with irrigation, with
I don't think
sprinklers,
so.
with-
No, there would not be any, you do not want water on the hillside, so.
Okay, that's why I was like, wait,
Yeah,
what?
I think, the way I understand this, they would just be supplementing maybe some additional, seed of native grasses, but it'll likely stay looking very similar to what it is now.
And as far as maintaining that with irrigation, or are we just relying on natural?
Yeah,
It's
no
non-irrigated.
water, no water.
We don't
You
want a
don't want water.
landslide.
We had a discussion about, trying to save water and conserve water in the city. I was just a little curious what the plan was. Okay. You're actually going through a lot of my stuff, so don't anybody be stressing out. Geotech report. So this was something there was on the Geotech report that was provided in the packet. There was on page, this one's supposed to be really easy. I printed it, 163 of the packet. I don't know if you want to jump to it.
Okay.
It showed an emergent wetland that basically ran across the entire backside, which is right where that slope probably comes down and meets up with where the buildings are planned. What needs to be done in terms of the Army Corps of Engineer signing off? Because obviously we have had issues in previous developments in the city where wetlands have been disturbed and there's been a huge cost that the
Right.
city has had to take care of to fix it. I'd rather not disturb it and get into trouble with it from the start.
This,
And I didn't see an Army Corps of Engineers certifying that
no,
we're good. So I
no,
was just
this
curious.
this is basically just following the old ditch that was abandoned forever and ever ago.
So emergent wetlands is not really emergent wetlands?
These would not be regulatory wetlands.
Okay. So nothing that the Army Corps of Engineers would need to sign off on or anything like
No.
that? Okay. Easy. 3 other points, unless somebody else wants to bring up something. So I'm not the only one talking here.
Go ahead. I've got plenty. Go ahead.
All right. The parking. I have concerns over the parking, specifically in the commercial and the R7 zones. And it's related to, number 1, the off-street parking, Title 10, Chapter 8, Paragraph 2, a screening of 5 or more vehicles in any off-street parking area. And then same thing with Title 10, Chapter 8, Paragraph 5, the number of parking spaces. I understand that number of spaces for each commercial unit is defined by the square footage of the building, but it's also defined by the use, which right now, do we know what the intended use is for any of the commercial buildings?
No, we don't.
We don't.
No.
And I understand there was a calculation that was done where it went to the max of 3.5. Is that correct? Here in the city?
3.5 is pretty much the max, the highest intensity retail use.
Okay.
There could be some possible configuration depending on number of tables and employees where
Shift
maybe
work, you know,
right, that
Things
could
like that.
possibly go to higher than 3.5. However, 4 of the 6 buildings are shown as drive-throughs, which in and of itself suggests that there would be less parking required because they're not stopping.
because that was the concern is say we have a drive-through because I know it's been identified as like an ice cream shop or like a soda shop, kind of like a Fizz or a Swig or something like that. Most of those buildings have in-store dining. And so is parking being accounted for those people that aren't just going to be utilizing a drive-through, but wanting to park, go in, meet up with somebody, have a soda?
To the best of our knowledge at this point, they meet the parking requirement. There could be a use that comes in where we would have to take another look at that. But if the parking is already provided, that may negate the ability to have that particular use if it was so intense that it overturned the 3.5 that we are already planning on.
Because that is the concern too, because I know, and I think most will agree, is that we all want viable commercial. We all want commercial that's going to survive, it's going to be successful, and it's going to be utilized not just by our citizens, but also by people coming in from outside of the community. And if we're not providing sufficient parking, what kind of impact is that going to give us in terms of having the successful commercial come in? Because we're only planning for a drive-through, not enough spaces, but we've got a company that, well, I'm going to need an additional number of spaces and it's not accounted for, and there's no way to go about changing it. It might limit our commercial options.
I suppose that's a possibility, but it's pretty standard to have proposed buildings, pads in commercial and not totally know all of the uses up front. So that's something that we would have to work out in the future, potentially, but
And I'm not wanting to make it so restrictive because again, we want it to be open to where we can bring in, again, those successful, viable companies.
Yeah, we
Right.
do
Which
too.
keep in mind that these buildings are not big.
No, they're not big at all.
They're very small.
So you're saying Walmart's not gonna move in?
No, no, I mean, it would
We
it'd
check.
be
Even a
great.
Walmart
check.
Express.
I think it would be great if there was really a lot in here, but I mean, they're 1,000 square feet, 2 of them, I believe.
Yeah, what's the building that's located in that phase 3? Because that looks like it's the
That one's
largest.
3,000 square feet, but that would be impacted by.
It's going to be reduced just because of the setbacks, correct?
Setbacks, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, potentially. So, I guess from our staff's opinion at this point is they meet the code.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well,
on that
On
section.
parking, sorry.
On
We
that
were
note,
talking
I'm gonna-
about parking. I'm saying
We're
they
talking
meet the
about
code.
parking.
They meet the code on parking.
Okay. I have a couple more, but I want to let somebody else talk. because you might cover one of my remaining points.
Go ahead.
Garbage collection. I didn't see in here for the commercial where there would be like a central collection area.
There are two places, one at the, it is just to the west of the entrance, a garbage collection area, and then one halfway down on the east side of that. Those are
Can
two
you
garbage
kind of
collection.
point out
bins.
if you don't mind?
Yeah, right at the,
The little notches.
Yeah. Kim, can you
Oh,
show
gotcha,
'em?
gotcha.
Do you see where those are? There's, yeah, one right there,
and then one just in the middle of the,
and then, yeah,
East
one,
access.
yep.
Okay. And that's gonna be shared, those two, by all of the commercial. Now, what about for the residential? Because I think this kind of goes
Did it-
back then to the discussion, is each individual home going to be given a garbage can? And
Yes.
what's the intended collection? Is it going to be, there's 62 units, are there gonna be 62 garbage cans wheeled out to South Weaver Drive every Monday when trash is getting collected? Or will there be garbage service coming into the residential portion to collect the garbage?
My understanding is that, I believe Shaylee talked about this the other night, that like Freedom Landing, they all have their own cans and the city collects it.
And the
So
city still collects it?
they just put it out on the road,
Yep.
not on South Weaver Drive, on the interior. road.
I actually happened to drive through Freedom Landing on garbage collection day, and it was very, very, very tight. And especially because I had a car coming towards me, and one of us literally had to pull in between two garbage cans in order to let the other person pass without hitting garbage cans that were on the other side. So,
Yeah.
because their road, I understand from the city council meeting, is 26 feet.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna talk anything about the private road that's on here, just because obviously it's still a city council, so that's one less thing for me to talk about. Final thing was just the traffic study. Is this what you guys were counting as the requested interface with Highmark Charter School, the traffic study? Because I know that when the rezone was approved, or at least recommended for approval from the planning commission, one of the conditions was to have an interface specifically with Highmark, because it is going to be an issue, all of the parking. And I should have taken pictures and brought them so that we can throw them up on the screen. There are cars, and I get it if you think that it's Highmark's problem and not your problem as the landowner, as the developer, but it is a problem that will affect our citizens. It's a problem that's gonna affect people trying to come in and utilize the commercial, trying to get into their homes. And I see crazy things every day. People doing U-turns in the middle of South Weaver Drive, people pulling over and then turning and trying to do U-turns in all directions. And I guess the only other concern I had with the traffic study was it, and I am not an expert on traffic studies. I could probably take a month-long course and still not understand how to read the actual reports, but it does appear that only one entrance was actually included, which was the west entrance, unless I was
No.
reading it wrong.
They're both included.
Both were,
So,
okay, then that was me.
some considerations for the traffic. You'll notice on this illustration that's before you, there's a right turn only into the development that will be painted on the road
Mhm.
required by UDOT. We had a conversation with UDOT about this property and reference specifically Highmark. Now, we have to recognize that it is Highmark's issue that they have to resolve on their use of parking and their limited access for their building. That is something they have to concern themselves with. However, the traffic counts and everything were taken into account in the traffic study in relation to Highmark. And by putting that right turn only, it does limit that on-street parking for that area. So they would not be able to park in that right turn entrance into
Mhm.
the development.
I didn't see any reference to Highmark in the traffic study.
Well, I mean that as far as the counts.
Yeah, just the counts.
They did the counts for
They did
the,
the counts at the two intersections, 2700 and 2100. They didn't do them in relation to Highmark. And all the traffic parts out there, the count, that was not included in the counts.
No, they counted the road, South Weaver Drive.
So it did
So
include the
it-
Highmark,
It
the
included
west,
all of the,
and exit only.
as far as the counts of the number of vehicles on South Weaver Drive. They did not look at the specific entrances into Highmark.
Mhm. No, I'm talking the exits, because you've got that
Or
one
exit.
exit
Either one.
right on the other side of the retention pond that is an exit only. It's supposed to be an exit only. It's not always utilized that way, but it has a left turn lane and then a right turn lane in the 2 exit lanes.
Are you talking about Highmark or on
Highmark.
this?
Highmark.
Right. They did not look at specifically at any of the entrances. They looked at the traffic on the road.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's important to note with traffic studies and traffic impact, the landowner can only control what happens on their land. And so you can't hold one landowner responsible for another landowner's impact to the community. That's something we have to be really careful about in making that determination. Because Highmark does overuse and is an overpacked use for that, was taken into account because they included those numbers in the count of the use of the road, but the impact is also minimal because it is only 2 times a day. If we put that in perspective, it isn't all day that the cars are stacked on the road. So those are just some considerations.
Yeah, and I can speak to when Highmark was approved, their plan said that they would contain all of their traffic on their property.
That hasn't happened from day one.
It has not. No, it has not. And they've been fortunate, I suppose, that their, next door neighboring property didn't have any uses on it, that they have been allowed basically to park along the road. But they're responsible for the traffic they generate. So that's something that the city can maybe help try to facilitate, encourage. But the impact that this particular proposal is having, they need to mitigate what they're bringing. And they're doing that by putting the turn lane, right-hand turn lane on the south side of the road, and the center lane will be marked as a left turn lane for entering.
Mm-hmm.
It just so happens that the road already accommodates that. So all it requires is restriping. If, let's say, the road was narrower, they would have to widen the road to provide those.
Mm-hmm.
But since it's already that way, then that can be accommodated.
How far out from the intersections is it going to be? Because I know one of the problems we have had, obviously, and this is again Highmark, is the parking right up to the intersections or to the entrances and the exits, which is causing a visual problem where you can't really see the cars that are approaching.
Right. And that
so
makes
how many feet do we have that's going to either be designated as a,
that's a conversation that we may need to just have with UDOT to restrict parking on that side altogether.
okay. Which my concern is, and I know that it's not your problem, the parking that is being generated and caused by Highmark, but I see this as now we start just pushing it further down South Weaver Drive, or the north side of South Weaver Drive is all designated as no parking. And now we start having people ignoring that, parking, kids running across the street, and that is a situation I don't even want to think about.
Or we
No.
just encourage Highmark families to move into these townhomes and they can walk. So,
Good.
Like cutting your commute time in.
Yeah, they could. Those are all issues between the city, Highmark, and UDOT.
And our engineer has discussed at length with UDOT, and it's been,
And have they been pretty receptive?
Yeah. Well, UDOT was the one that required the turn lanes.
Mhm.
Okay, Wesco.
All right. Actually, this is one of the better designs that I've seen come before the planning commission. You're getting close, in my opinion. I think you're getting real close. The densities. When you computed the densities on this, did you include the hillside as part of those densities?
Yes.
You can't do that.
Yes, we can.
Yes, they can.
Now,
Its
Larry,
own-
we brought that up last planning commission meeting about using non-buildable area to compute densities.
we can't change it in the middle of the road.
You can't,
Go back to code.
back to go, okay.
And again, we're trying to follow the code the best we can.
Yeah.
And
But in the past, we talked about another development that was coming in, and they were using an area that's non-buildable, flat land, because it's within the crash zone of the base as part of their densities. And we said, no, you can't do that. And to me, if we use that on that instance, this hillside applies to the
So-
same thing.
Those are different circumstances. One was an easement,
No, these.
which had the residential rights that were purchased for that property. This is a hillside, and so
It's not
we can't,
buildable.
it isn't buildable. Well, we determined it's non-buildable. However, state provision does allow for allowances for development on non-buildable areas for these hillsides, as well as our code doesn't prohibit us from calculating non-buildable areas for density
Okay,
calculations.
all right, okay. In the past, our annual city council and planning commission meetings, we have discussed residential, commercial being combined on a property like this. And we've always said we'd like to see 50-50, 50% footprint of residential, 50% footprint of commercial. This, you have about 2/3 of the footprint is residential and about 1/3 is commercial. I like, it's what we got, but I think we could see more commercial. And way you can do that is those two townhouses that are up against the commercial unit. If you were to take those two and make those commercial, extend your commercial over that way, you would increase the amount of commercial space available. I don't think it'd be a big drawback to the developer or anything.
Which
We
ones are
can,
you talking about?
The one on the end down there.
It's
For
already,
code,
it's
we
already
can't.
been zoned.
It's in the zone.
It's already been
Yeah.
rezoned.
Yeah.
So
That would
the
rezone it
city
again.
council had rezoned this property. The developers proposing to use the specific zones that it was rezoned
Okay.
for their uses. That's not a requirement we can make to expand commercial or anything.
But it would solve the problem of the setback there with that commercial building also. Instead of reducing the size of the commercial building, if you go and request a rezone on those two commercial or those two townhouses, two commercial, that'd work.
And Wes, just to comment real quick on your 50-50, as much as we like it, it's not code.
That's not code, right, right. Open space was calculated using the hillside. On the townhomes on the east end there, those are individual residential areas, right?
What do you mean by residential?
You're
areas?
selling the townhomes, you're not renting them out.
They're
No.
so-
They're being sold? Yeah. So we're gonna have 31 units down there on a dead-end road.
We calculate the residential from the center point of the entrance there. If you take the center point, it does intersect between a building. So one of those residential units is on the west side of that center point.
Center
and so
point,
that
okay. So we got 30 units and
30 units and that meets code.
does the fire code require no more than 28 or 26 or 28 units without two entries?
It's 30.
30? So we're right at that point.
Yes.
Correct.
The-
All right.
The fire code matches with the city code.
Okay, good. Traffic study, I wish they would have brought in the hallmark as part of that to look at that. That is an issue that the city's going to have to address. It's a hazard up there. Avoid it like the plague, basically, in the morning and in the afternoon. And as far as the parking, you're going to have a lot of no parking areas along that front because and the other thing is how is the parking going to impact the commercial? That's what I'd like to know is people going to park out there, go shopping, or are they going to pull into the commercial area, park and wait for their kids there coming out Highmark? There's got to be some way to control that.
That's not necessarily something that we can
do.
impose upon them.
Right.
I mean, it's just something the developer just will keep in mind as they utilize the property, that there could be an impact from parents that are using their parking lot to park and stand for
Yeah,
their child, but
The landscaping, currently we're talking about 59% of the area needs to be landscaped. I'd like to see that reduced with xeriscaping. We're in a drought. We're going to continue being in a drought for years. And I think I'd like to see something to reduce the amount of landscaping in that area. The berm, I like the berm idea between the commercial and the residential. I'd take that berm and put it along the edge of the sidewalk out through there. Make it kind of twisty down through there to match the walking path. That'd be good there. The hillside and the back of those units. In the past, the fire chief has said he needs an access road for emergency purposes if he needs to get into that hillside for a fire. Have you discussed that with the fire chief at all?
Yeah, has signed off. You see that where it hammerheads on the side, that can be an access to the hillside on the hammerhead.
But in the middle of it, if you get a fire in the middle of that area,
Then they would just go to the hammerhead and head over.
Hammerhead where?
Where those,
This?
yeah,
yeah.
where the T is at the end, that can be a potential access. But buyer has signed off on the plan.
It's amazing because one time he said he couldn't have that without a access down through there. The fire chief said on another proposal at one time. The trail. I sit on the city's Parks and Recreation Committee, and they've looked to talk with Mr. Cornelius about trailhead up there. He said, no, you're gonna have to move that trail. The city is working with a couple of the property owners to where the trail goes to the west to have an access through there right of way. I believe the city is purchasing a right of way for that trail, so you're gonna have to redesign your trail there.
Well, I can address that. Since the city doesn't have an agreement from anybody at this point, all they can show is that they'll provide a trail, and city's gonna have to try to tell them where to run it to. The trail is a requirement on the general plan, and so that's why they're providing it. But since the city is going to have to be the one that has to facilitate getting it actually up to View Drive somehow.
Is it city maintained?
It would be, this through the development, it would be maintained by them, by the HOA.
Is this gonna be an HOA?
Next
Some are
question.
asking.
I'm putting him on the spot.
I'm trying to remember
I
what we
would-
talked about on.
Private property.
Yeah, I would.
So through there, yes, it would be a public easement, but it would be maintained by them until it leaves their property, and then depending on where it goes, I guess. I mean, it would not be from there on to View Drive. It would likely be the city's responsibility.
So this is gonna be an HOA?
Yeah.
It will have to have an
All
HOA,
owned by
yes.
the same.
Yeah, okay.
Can I make a comment on that trail, Mark?
Quick.
Point of order, can you come up here so that we can actually hear and everybody can see? Thanks.
Years ago, there used to be a retention pond required there at the end of Peachwood. And Mark Fernandez came to the city and asked if they would give him that property. I advised the mayor at the time to not do that. Hope Mark's not watching, he'll be mad at me, but he's not a team player, and he pushed the city to give that to him, but he's always resisted anything in return to help with the city.
Right.
I think the city ought to approach him. He doesn't have homes on that west end of that.
The city did approach him, the Parks Committee did approach him, he said no.
Did they know that they had given him that property?
Yes, they knew that.
It's gonna have to be something that the city's gonna have to work out. Because this isn't some kind of a development agreement or something where they give us a completed trail all the way. We can't require anything beyond their property, but we can require that they build a trail across their property because that's part in the general plan, so that's what they're providing. Until we know exactly where to tell them to run it to on that south end, the only choice they have is to show it conceptually.
Yeah.
It'd be easy for Mark to give up 4 feet to put right down that west
Yeah, but
property.
he
line.
said no.
Keep working on
The Geotech Report, I didn't see any maps in there indicating where there were any test holes made. In the past, there has been test holes. I think I'd like to see where those were originally.
I believe what you got in the packet was the phase 1 environmental,
Yeah,
not the original geotech. At least I didn't see it in there. So if you'd like to look at that, and we can provide that.
okay,
Staff's reviewed it and feel comfortable.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we provided everything that, you know, they asked and was required on the application, so
Yeah,
we have that and we can give that if you need it, but.
we've answered most of my questions. Like I say, this is a step in the right direction. I would like to see a bit more commercial myself in there and not a reduction in any commercial.
Okay, well, some people are going to like what I have to say. Some people are going to hate what I have to say. I like this. I think it's a nice balance. It brings commercial to the city. It also brings housing, which is in desperate need in Utah. Personally, I'm not a fan of townhouses, so I will never be buying a townhouse here, but that's okay. I already have a house in South Weaver, so I don't need this. I also want to say I trust staff. I trust their review. I trust their recommendations. We pay them a lot of good money to review this. I am not an engineer. I'm not an expert, and I really like it, but I do think we need to see those changes, which they have outlined. I do like the berm and the fence. I think that is something that we should consider. But I like it, and I think it's a shame if we drag this on any longer. So.
Just one quick comment. There was discussion about affordability. Townhouses right now in this area are $200,000 to $300,000 each. I wouldn't really call-
400,000.
Nothing's affordable.
You know, that is not affordable housing. We can
They
dismiss that.
well, they can't. I mean, the market determines that.
Yeah.
So
This would probably what be considered as middle housing and not affordable housing, right? So it meets it. It's for working class, blue collar, not an affordable housing product.
There is no entry level housing right now in Utah.
Well, you could argue also because this has taken so long, like if this had been approved 4 years ago.
oh, it would have been affordable.
Yeah, so,
That's true.
if anything, it's partially the city's fault for having them go through 30 million cycles here, so. I don't know, I think, I understand what you're saying, Wes, for sure, but the reality is that affordable housing doesn't exist in the market today.
It doesn't exist in Utah.
Yeah, and
Well, and it's not up to the city to determine affordability or profits or any of those things for a development. It's not within our jurisdiction, if that's the
Yeah.
right word.
So,
I have a quick question,
Go ahead.
and it's just about the crash gate. I want to bring this up. So there's that crash gate that's located on the, I have to reorient myself every time, northeast corner. How is that going to work if there's cars in the drive-through lanes? And then all of a sudden we have an emergency situation and the fire, I'm guessing it's
Called the
fire.
crash gate for a reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but over cars, like, am I the only one that has a little bit of a concern with that being a fire access?
I'm not entirely certain that was required. That was part of a previous plan.
Okay,
I think it remained on there.
it carried over.
I don't know that the fire chief is requiring that, but we could check with him to just make sure.
Because I guess just
It's a valid concern. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, if those are all full, then you wouldn't be able to get, through
unless
there.
we've got any of our new equipment with the fire station that can crush vehicles.
but
I don't think
the
we have that.
access from the main entrance to there or directly from South Weaver Drive. I mean, the
We'll
access is
possibly
really,
have cars there as well.
but it's
Okay.
just not that far away from the road.
So Trevor, help me on this one here. So we do have kind of a big question mark about the private right of way. We were hoping the city council would have approved that. I think that was just Tuesday, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
it was just last Tuesday.
But they continued it. So there's still a question out there.
A giant question mark.
We do have some options. We can, approve this as is, approve it with recommendations. We can deny it, or we can continue it pending some of these other, because you know what it needs to meet code. So, and not just you, but the commission here. And Trevor's kind of laid out the options for us here and given us the language. I think he knows we've been struggling with our language on motions, so.
I'm learning.
Appreciate
Have you
that.
noticed I'm learning as I go? I'm adaptable.
So before I ask this, are there any other questions or comments?
Do you mind if I do just a 2-minute recap
Sure.
before you guys do a vote? Okay, I'm Brad Parker. Scott.
Well, if we do a vote, we'll see what happens here.
So I just wanted to say, I mean, I want to be specific, I guess. We're here specifically for, what Planning Commission does, which is review code. And that's what we prepared for tonight. And this has been 3 months of a ton of money and a ton of hours and time to get the revisions that we had through staff and third-party revisions, fire, utility providers. I mean, it's traffic studies, UDOT. This is not, this is now 3 years in the making. But what we're here for tonight is very specific, that we were asking for a vote that if this follows code, and that we've done everything that has been asked in your code. And if not, that if there's 1, maybe 2 items that does not follow code, mostly because we've been waiting for the city to give us a solution to a public right of or a private right of way, right? Well, originally it was supposed to have been done about 3 or 4 months ago, and they got pushed, and now it's been continued once again. I know you guys don't have control over that, this commission. I understand that. So all we're asking is that you don't hold up all the progress that we have made and all the code that we have truly followed painstakingly between, I mean, Trevor knows how many times this has gone back and forth, how many weeks upon weeks upon weeks.
We're best friends. We've talked so much.
I mean, we're literally talking hundreds and hundreds of
Cried
minute
on each
changes.
other's shoulder.
Back and forth and back and forth. So we have done, this is not just a let's throw it together and get a little closer. This is a very professional process that we've done with staff to get to where we are, and we're here for progress. We're asking for a vote to approve this plan tonight. And if you need to vote to approve it with some suggestions that need to be made, we're okay with that. We also would be fine because those things are out of your control that we need to wait for city council. But we don't want everything else, the other 98% of work that's been done, that's been reviewed, that's been approved by staff, that's been approved by third parties, that's been approved by the state and UDOT, and our engineers as well, to be held up by the 2% that just can't seem to make a decision. And we'll wait and we'll go through that process. We've been doing it for 3 years. We're okay to wait a couple more months. Again, that's what we're asking. We like the plan. We know that it follows code to the best of our ability. Thank you.
I think one thing to consider just that if an approval is sought tonight, it doesn't mean they can build tomorrow, right? There's still a final process that everything needs to be finalized. But like we've stated before, there's that one provision of the private right of way that currently doesn't meet code. There is a solution that is being considered by the city council, but no resolution has come to that. So that's just for your consideration. If you do move to approve, just I want us remembering the process, that there's still more to the process of finalizing that. The other concerns, I would say our only major concern is the private right of way on staff side. There's a few other things that need to be adjusted that the developer's aware of, and that we feel comfortable with a conditional approval on that side. But it's for the planning commission to decide for their decision on how they want to proceed at this point.
I just have a quick question, because it was something I actually just thought about. You guys say you are not doing a PUD, but there will be an HOA with the restricted covenants. Do you guys have a draft of those covenants, conditions, and restrictions
No.
that you've been working on? No?
Mm-mm.
Have you received a letter of approval from the secondary water showing that sufficient water is available for the community at sufficient pressure? We have those.
Yes,
Yeah,
And then also the utility notifications have all been completed.
yes.
oh, sorry, I guess we've already given you a draft of the
You do have
HOA.
a draft. You guys have that on file with the city?
Yes.
I will admit the private right-of-way discussion, and can't apologize because I didn't have anything to do with it. You know, it's still being discussed with city council. I do think it's something, because the road right now on the plans, the preliminary plans are assuming the private right-of-way will be allowed, correct?
Plan A that was presented,
Plan A allowing a private right-of-way in an
right,
R7.
which the biggest
So-
risk there is on us by far, right? If they don't approve it, we've done all this for nothing. There's no-
Exactly, because should the city council go with not option A and with the other option where it is not allowed, I think it will very drastically change your preliminary plan.
Correct.
And again, our task in front of us is it's administrative. Does it fit our code? Like, that's what we're really trying to weigh in on. And I think right now where we have such a big question mark, I don't know where the other commissioners are at, but I'm kind of thinking to continue. Because I don't want to get into a situation where it's an approval with condition A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because then it's something you have to keep going back to make sure where the conditions met. I think, yes, time has gone by, but I don't think waiting, because this would go to city council, or it's continuing to city council in their January meeting.
No,
What meeting is it going to for January?
Are you talking about the private right-of-way ordinance?
Yes,
In January, yes.
yeah, private right of way is in January, which would mean if we continued it tonight, the preliminary, so that we could get the action of our council and the, what they choose to go with, we would then have clear direction on the preliminary. That's where I'm leaning, is just a continuation of it. And it would be I'm not going to table it, because tabling can be indefinite until we decide to bring it up. And I don't think that's respectful of anybody's time. But let's continue it, is where I'm going.
On the continuance, just to kind of give you a procedure of how that could happen,
Mhm.
because we've done the public hearing tonight, that's no longer needed for the preliminary plan, right? So it's possible if you choose to continue it contingent on a decision by the city council for the private right of way,
Mhm.
it could be added to the January planning commission meeting as long as we meet the agenda timelines.
Mhm.
If you have that condition. So it could come back in January, or if you want to just continue it until the next meeting, you can make that continue. Does that make sense? You can have a contingency of when it comes back, or a time frame on when it
Well,
comes
at
back.
least making sure that city council has,
We could do a continuance based upon the city council.
Yes, you can do that.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it.
or can we make it on condition of approval from city council?
Right, I don't see a lot of value in continuing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't, like, if we recommend approval with the,
but we're
3 or
approving
4.
something that doesn't match our code right now. And
But-
we're approving something that we don't know,
we're approving on condition that.
or recommending for approval. We're not approving.
No, you are
We're
approving tonight.
Recommending for
We're
approval.
approving,
You're making the decision.
Oh, we are
tonight.
making the decision.
but you
Yeah,
can put
and-
conditions
Based
on
Right.
it.
Exactly. So I don't see the value in holding it up for city council to make their decision. Because if we do our approval based on city council approving the right of way and they don't approve it, then it's all, like the developer said, then everything's all for naught and we start back at ground zero anyway.
You come back with a new preliminary plan at that point? Is that
Yes.
correct?
You would have to.
That's the procedure?
They would have to, because the preliminary, it wouldn't meet the conditions, so then it would de facto be.
Okay. I guess I just have a hard time approving something that does not meet our code, because again, that code is what gives us our parameters to operate within.
But
So-
that's why I think it's smart to say we approve, but you need to do these 3 or 4 things.
That's the problem, is we're approving something that doesn't meet our code. Whereas with
Well-
it continuing, we get it to either
You're approving it
fall within our
pending
code.
that they do all that.
This is a
It's
unique,
just- It's not an approval.
Do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, I hear what everybody else is saying. we're approving something that we don't have.
It is a unique situation in the
Mhm.
fact that
Word.
there's a solution that's already being considered by the city council. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yep.
And so that could factor in. If private right of ways wasn't being considered by the city council and you made it a condition of the city council changes that code, that would not fly, right? Because there's nothing on the table ever.
Mhm.
But right now, with the item that is being considered, you could make that recommendation. I'm not saying whether or not you will or should not. That's your prerogative tonight. But that's kind of a unique situation that you could make that.
I know, Matt, I really wish that Taylor was here because we're obviously a split vote at this point, which I don't know how that plays out.
Yeah, how does that work if we are 50-50 on this?
We're back where it was option A, option B again.
Well,
Well, looking at Brandon, Brandon answered.
you would have to make a decision. So if there's a split decision, then someone would have to remake a motion and see if that motion carries. Does that make sense? So you'd move until a motion finishes out. Blair?
Please, go ahead, Blair.
And I hope I'm not speaking out in terms of the rest of the council, but the main reason, as you heard, that it was getting continued was to expand the use of right of ways, not restrict it more.
Mhm.
And so the likelihood of it not being there probably is pretty small.
Okay.
But that's my opinion from the discussion.
I got the same thing from the discussion, so. Okay, it might take us 15 minutes to make a motion. So I'd look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary application for South Weaver Gateway Development. And then I'm just gonna really read this because I think this kind of falls along with what we're talking about here. With the following conditions or recommendations: A, we recommend approval for the buffer yard alternative proposed by the developer of the city council. B, the required screening between R7 and lower density zones has been satisfied in accordance to city code and present conditions on the property. C, final subdivision plat includes proper setbacks for all zones. A decision of the private right-of-way ordinance that facilitates the current layout of the development. And I like F, all other recommendations notated by the city engineer and city planner have been incorporated into the final application.
Okay,
Can I amend his motion? Did you include B,
Yes.
the
Yeah.
required screening between R7?
you did.
Okay, perfect. Then I withdraw my amendment.
Do I have a second? I'll second. Okay, so do a roll call vote. Commissioner Losi,
I am unfortunately a no.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson, Johnson, sorry.
I will go with it, yes.
And I am an aye as well. So the motion carries 3-4 and 1 against. Okay,
More commercial, come on.
wow, I feel like we should be done after that, but we got 2 more items.
10-minute break.
Trevor, give me your opinion on how long these items are going to take, you think?
Landscape ordinance, we can continue that item to a future date it is just a discussion item tonight. And so if you would like to just review that on your own and get with me and make any comments individually, we can do it that way and continue that item. The training, probably 20 minutes. It shouldn't be very long, 15 minutes. Should I say 15 so we can hit your 8 o'clock?
You got 14.
Do we need to make a motion to continue the discussion item? Or can we just kick it down the road?
Yeah.
Okay. We okay kicking the landscape ordinance down the road?
I'm okay.
That's fine.
Okay. All right, let's do your training, Trevor.
Okay. All right. So this is I really enjoyed putting this together today. It helped me rework my brain into some property rights and vested right conversation. This is I think when we think of land use, this is like the essential idea of land use. What inherent rights do you have as a property owner, and when are those rights? When can they never be taken away? Basically, that's a really important topic. So if you want to advance. So property rights, again, one of the most important rights associated with property ownership is the ability to adapt or develop it for some profitable or desirable use. Development and use of property supports economic growth and contributes to the public welfare. Yeah. You got it. So here's some questions. I took a lot of this from the state ombudsman website. That's a really fun website to go read. Fun is subjective.
Define fun.
Well, when you're a little land use nerd, I guess it's fun. All property is subject to reasonable control and regulation by government entities, right? We see that with our zoning, with our restricted uses and permitted uses. Local governments can regulate those uses and improvements of property to protect and promote the health, safety, and welfare of the public. That's a very common theme as I work with city councils. That's the idea, is when we make these decisions. One thing that I really love about city government is all of us are here to make the city that we live in a better place to be, right? And I remind myself, even when we differ in opinions, we all have the same opinion that we want the city to be a better place. And so that's the idea of regulating some improvements on the property, is to make sure that you have your rights to use your property as you want within those regulations, but it also, everybody else also has their right to use their property, right, and not be impeded. And so that's the delicate balance that we have as a government, is to find that balance between promoting their individual use, but not supplanting somebody else's health, safety, and welfare in the process.
That's the Ninth Amendment.
Exactly.
Constitution.
Exactly. Okay, you can advance. Now, I don't know if we've ever been familiar with this concept, but what if I disagree with the zoning ordinance's restrictions?
Never happened.
Never happened. I think everybody loves them, right? No, it's a valid question, valid concern. Any citizen may petition their local government to consider a change to zoning ordinances. Local governments have a wide latitude to adopt and amend zoning ordinances as part of their authority to promote the public welfare. Unless it can be shown that the zoning ordinance does not advance the general welfare, or that the ordinance violates constitutional rights or some other controlling statute, the regulation will be upheld. So that's why we hire city attorneys, right? They help us keep within those bounds to make sure that we're doing things right. This is also a foreign concept, but what if I don't want a proposed development to be approved, right? That we don't live in a bubble, right? We live and we operate within this giant ecosystem, and sometimes we're uncomfortable with change, and sometimes there's change that is not warranted in our community, and we want to make sure that fits the health, safety, and welfare, right? And that's the continual conversation that we'll always have throughout all time. You can participate in the public hearings if you don't like a proposed development. We saw that tonight, right? And that's great. Again, we're all trying to do the best for the city, and I think that's really important to remember, that we all have that shared desire. Notice the public hearings, we put those in required places. We're always consistent with that. Kim is very good at getting all of our notices out, just as they should. She tells me off all the time. Just kidding. But she keeps us all in line. We're really grateful for Kim in doing that. There are some routine zoning decisions or interpretations of zoning ordinance and certain other matters that are made public without a public hearing. Any aggrieved party may appeal a final decision on a proposed development. So when do I have a right to develop my property? I have a personal property. How to develop? The vested rights rule provides that an applicant for subdivision approval or a building permit is entitled to approval if the application is complete and complies with the zoning requirements in place on the date the application is submitted. Put simply, the vested right rule means that The government cannot change the zoning rules after an application is filed. So the vesting rights rule, as we think about this, you know, it talks about an approved and a complete application. We have different points of entry in that process. We talked about that, right? And the sketch plan is one of those points of entry. If they put their application in the sketch plan, then they have vested rights to their property at that point, as long as they meet those application conditions. Now, when they apply for preliminary, that's when you, as a planning commission, get to review and see if you want to grant those vested rights for the development, right? So by an approval of that application, even on approval conditions, you're creating those vesting rights. Now, you're putting conditions on those vested rights, like you did tonight. You're saying you have the vested rights on condition that these things are met, right? And one of those was that it complies with the code. Once they do that, then their rights are vested. So what do vested rights mean to an applicant? So an applicant whose rights have been vested is entitled to consideration of the application under the ordinances in place when the application is filed, and approval of the application under the zoning ordinances in place, even if the ordinances are subsequently changed. So a developer a year ago gets final approval on a development. In that year, in this last year, we changed a lot of the uses, right, for or defined some uses for our zones. The developer gets the rights of when he was vested. Now and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I'm sure, but our vesting rights last 2 years from the approval. Okay, so that's not an indefinite vesting. They have 2 years to use that approval, and if they do not, then they're no longer vested, and they have to comply with the current code. So you may see applications that come forward that, you know, is amending a site plan or different things like that, but their use is still a vested use as long as something drastic hasn't changed on that approval. And so so we have to go with what the code was at that time. Are there exceptions to vesting? Absolutely. An applicant can't claim vested rights if the process to change a zoning ordinance that would affect the application has been initiated before the application was submitted, and the ordinance change is ultimately approved. So let's say for the private road ordinance, if we were going through and saying we're going to remove private roads, and an applicant applies after the fact, as we've already started that process, they would have to be held to whatever the decision is on that ordinance that's being considered at that time, right? But if they applied and had a complete approved application prior to that, then they can choose whether to step down or keep their vested rights through that process. An applicant can't gain vested rights if the local government can show that there's a compelling and countervailing public interest that would be jeopardized if the proposed development were carried out. Now, on this one, I would always advise us, before we use this option, to talk to Jamie and make sure that we have that ability. There are legal parameters and some tests that they have to run in order to make it sure it's compelling and countervailing, right? And also, the Utah Code provides that the validity of an approved application is conditioned upon proceeding with reasonable diligence. Several jurisdictions have ordinances with cancel land use approvals after a period of time with no development activity. Like I said, we have 2 years here. That's our code. Now, when is an application considered complete? An application is considered complete when it's submitted in a form that complies with the applicable requirements of a local zoning ordinance and all required fees have been paid. So with approval with conditions, it's not considered complete until those conditions are met, right? What if an ordinance changes before an application is complete? So vested right rules provides that an applicant is entitled to approval if the development application continues with the zoning ordinance in place when the application becomes complete. Utah Code also provides that an application must receive substantive review under the ordinances that were in place when the application became complete. Even if there were subsequent changes to the ordinance, This provision recognizes that some development applications require a lengthy review process. If an applicant relied on language in a zoning ordinance, it would be unfair to deny that applicant vested rights simply because the ordinance language was changed before an application could be fully reviewed. That could be like, say we're doing a large master plan development. Those take sometimes years to get through. And it just allows for that flexibility for both the city and the development. There are some case studies that are really interesting to read about, but I'll just give you like the lowdown, what the findings were for those case studies. So in Western Land Equities versus City of Logan, an owner of property holds it subject to a zoning ordinance enacted pursuant to a locality's police power. That's a lot of $10 words in there. So they hold the vesting subject to the zoning ordinance that's enacted pursuant to the policing power. So an applicant, that's less so much on our side, but that's just for us to know there. An applicant for subdivision approval or a building permit is entitled to favorable, this is really important, is entitled to favorable action if the application conforms to zoning ordinance in place at the time of application, unless changes in the zoning ordinance are pending, which would prohibit the use applied for, or unless there are compelling countervailing reasons to deny the application. So if an application is coming before you and everything is complete and everything meets code, then this is saying that approval process, they're entitled to a favorable approval, right? It's when they meet code, then they meet code, and we have to allow that.
So real quick question there. When it says that changes in the zoning ordinance are pending, so that's saying that if someone has submitted an application and at that moment something is pending, then we can kind of put it on pause until we figure out that and then go back to the application.
Yeah,
That was
similar.
the Stevens property.
Yeah, similar to what we just did tonight. Right?
Yeah. And also-
There's a pending, and so on this one it said like if it conforms to the zoning ordinance. Right now tonight didn't conform to the zoning ordinance, but there's a pending decision, and so you're saying as long as it conforms to that decision and it's correct, then we would grant the vesting and approval. But if it does not, then it does not. Does that make sense? So we saw it kind of, often you see these and like they're changing it to be more restrictive. The proposal of the city council would be changing it to be more expansive. And so it's kind of like the opposite, but it's the same principle. An applicant for approval of a planned and permitted use should not be subject to shifting policies that do not reflect serious public concerns. It is incumbent on a local government to act in good faith and not reject an application to simply substitute the judgment of current officials for that of their predecessors. That's like a heavy, heavy sentence, right? But it's basically saying that you have a code and they're allowed to use the code as it stands. Even if their current officials that don't agree with the code, as long as it meets the code, then it's not subject to your policies. It's subject to the judgment of the predecessors before you until you change that policy. In this one, Sherbel, I don't know how to spell it, Sherbel versus Salt Lake City. A city council under the council mayor form of government should not hear appeals from zoning decisions made by a planning commission. We have an appeal authority that hears those, right? An applicant for subdivision approval or a building permit is entitled to a favorable action if the application conforms to zoning ordinance. We talked about that already. And if an application does not conform to the requirements of a zoning ordinance, it cannot serve to vest any right in particular zoning classification. Thus, if an application does not meet the requirements for land use, no rights in that application vest. So like tonight, no vesting occurs until those conditions are met.
Question.
Yes.
Who is the appeal authority in South Weaver? It's
David Stevenson, or somebody from his law firm handles.
David
the appeal.
Stevenson, so the law firm?
Yes.
Okay, Jamie?
Jamie is not.
No.
Jamie is
Okay.
our attorney.
Separate.
He can't.
It's separate. Okay. Thank you.
So are there any questions about vesting, and does that help at all? I think it helps frame kind of those decisions and those conversations. So,
Okay, I didn't do that.
No, you're good. You're good. All right. Comments from the planning commission. Commissioner Losi, anything?
Aren't you sick of hearing from me? Actually, I have two things. First is just related to some of the discussion tonight. I think what would be very helpful is if in the staff memos, that we include details on preliminary plans, like if it's a PUD with an HOA, if it's a subdivision, because the whole condo unit, if that's what this I know that was something that I kind of felt unprepared to really discuss, because I was going through the preliminary plan between a PUD and a subdivision and trying to figure out what the intent was. And obviously you guys spend more time, that's just something that I think would be helpful. And it's unfortunate that the developer and the landowners all left, because in terms of the no vote, I just wanted to clarify why. I just feel it's irresponsible to approve a preliminary plan outside of our administrative function. And I did not like the buffer yard alternative that was proposed. I still think there's an issue with the parking and sufficient parking that needs to be addressed for both the commercial and the residential. And then I also feel that those setbacks on the southern residential buildings is not sufficient without going into the hillside. So maybe they'll go back and listen to this meeting and hear the reasons why I got a no vote, or they got a no vote, maybe not, but that's it.
Okay. Commissioner Davis.
The only thing I wanted to bring up, The only thing I wanted to bring up was the comment made earlier, I can't remember who made it, around when we have the public comment. That was really curious to me, so I think we should.
I
discuss
actually
that.
leaned over to Trevor and said, let's look into that.
Okay.
Because we have changed it this year, because we used to do the public comment first before everything. And then we changed it to have an introduction, which like tonight Trevor did. And
Yep.
then, so Trevor, he has well, now it's official now because I've said it out loud. He has an assignment to look into that and see when the appropriate
Timing.
time is.
Perfect.
Is that a code change,
I don't
or-
think it's a code
or is it just
change.
a policy like
I
procedure?
think just procedural.
Okay.
The one thing though, one of the comments was that, she wanted a discussion. That is not what public comment is. And so I just wanted to clarify that. Again, I wish they were here to
Me
hear
too.
that. But yeah, I've asked Trevor to look into that.
Okay, perfect. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson.
My term is coming up, and I've had a lot
No.
of people approach me and say reapply, so I did.
Okay.
Yay.
Can you,
Yes.
according to the bylaws?
Yes.
He's
Uh,
served since 2014, and unfortunately, that's more than 2 terms. He can't.
Consecutive
I
term.
Was it 2014 that I started?
I love it.
Oh, okay. All right, then I can't do it then. All right,
Darn it.
you'll lose me.
So,
Can we keep you in our back, can we keep you in our back pocket?
You keep me in my back pocket, unless I go fishing.
okay.
We'll catch you on the river. Where's your favorite fishing hole? I'm just gonna know so I can come traipse for you.
About 3 miles from my cabin.
There you go. In the Uintas, right? Upper Uintas?
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Well, since this is our last meeting of the year, I just want to thank Mayor Joe and Councilmember Windsor. I know they're not here, but thank them for their service to the city, running for office and dealing with everything that comes with that. Whether you agree with them or not, it deserves appreciation and gratitude for their service, and look forward to working with Mayor-elect Westbrook and Councilmember-elect Dills. So.
When are they sworn in?
January 4th.
January 4th?
There'll be a meeting and there'll be awards.
Okay. All right, well, if nothing else, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thanks,
Am I
everyone.
allowed to say it?